So I'm going to now just briefly talk about the section on Russia, because again, I like us looking also at things that are going to end up linking into issues in modern Western culture as well. And Russia is still a major world power, and this section in particular has a lot of relevance to putting Russia more Western oriented than it was before. Okay, but um, again, as I've always pointed out, and you will see from the time periods that we've been talking about to now, Russia being in this kind of weird situation in which it's not really fully seen as Asian or fully European. It's kind of in its own thing. I'm not making this category. I'm talking about perception by outsiders. Okay, and I think even to a certain extent, I've had Russian friends that kind of feel the same way. This is anecdotal. I don't know, you know, but there is this kind of sense that Russia does things a little bit different, and yet it does still have links into the development of itself within what we call the Western world. Okay, now in terms of its peasants, peasants are treated bad throughout history everywhere. So that's that. Period. Okay. In Russia, there tends to be an exceeding amount of control over their peasants that is maybe more so than in other parts. We see a development over time where they used to be able to relocate relatively easy to then by 1649, a law is made that peasants perpetually are bound to their landlord's estate, and it's essentially slavery, okay, on a massive scale. All right, and so that's something that I just thought I'd point out. We're going to think about that later on when we talk about the Russian Revolution in the 20th century. But in any case, Russia is a very large landmass. It came into being through various sets of wars and spreading. And as again you see here on this map, look how we have Mongolia and China over here, and then we have Western Europe or Eastern, and then the Nordic world, Scandinavia over here, and then we have the Middle East. I mean, Russia is really kind of covering its geography, puts it in contact with all these various cultures. Now, the Cossacks, these are possibly descendants of fleeing peasants, historically supported revolts and served Russian Empire. They spread Russian dominance in Western and Eastern territories, and they even crossed Siberia into Alaska down to the California coast. Okay, just always something to remind you. See, look at here. It's kind of wild, right? Okay, now, who we want to focus on then is Tsar Peter, or Peter the Great. And he is the great westernizer, okay? He was an exceedingly tall man, 6'7". 6'7" at a time where people on average were much shorter, and 6'7" is tall now. So he must have really come off as had quite a regal presence, to say the least. What he did, you'll notice in his look here, if you remember looking at like Ivan the Terrible, those wonderful pictures of him, so grim with his big beard. He wants to transform even the appearance, the style of Russian nobility to look more Western. So he makes them, shave and take on grooming manners and styles of Western nobles. He ended the seclusion of women, making things a little bit, again, more like the Western world's habits, a little less draconian. Not women's rights per se, but not in the way it was they were doing in the past. He adopted the Western calendar, simplified the Russian alphabet, run the printing press, schools, created the first Russian Navy, made new capital in St. Petersburg, but he died with no heir. But he did take on this absolutist concept that was going on at the time. He was a hip Tsar, if you want to put it that way, okay? He's following the trends going on in Europe at the time. And he was not a nice guy, like many of these monarchs. He ends up killing one of his own sons, with maybe less regret, actually, than Ivan the Terrible. Ivan the Terrible, at least, was horrified to have killed the son on accident, while it was a little bit more deliberate for Peter the Great. In any case, he is significant for this evolution and aspect for Russia. Okay, and talked about in the text, he was able to struggle in a war, but keep up in a way that was better than maybe would have been, because he did actually advance having a navy. And was modernizing things in a way that helped him out in fighting the Swedes. But again, on this map, I think it helps to kind of get perspective on all these different kingdoms and lands, and to see here Finland, okay, incorporated into the Swedish kingdom, but a separate people. Later on, there's going to be a Russian-Finnish war that's very significant to Finns in the 20th century, that is not as known to the rest of the world, but a really big deal to Finns. And so there's this long-standing issue here between Russia and Finland. Okay, just thought I'd point that out. Actually, let's see. Let's go back. So, these were that's all I wanted to point out on this section. We covered a lot of ground. I'm gonna post 2 short videos on the Glorious Revolution of England and the Dutch Republic that come from a documentary and another lecturer. The influence of what happens in the British Isles has a tremendous effect on what's going to happen eventually in this country, the United States of America. And you would think that I would spend way more time talking about it, but since that also gets kind of incorporated into a U.S. history class, what I'm wanting you to think about is just the various aspects of what we think of when it comes to Western culture. So I want you to, again, to realize, to recap, that absolutism comes as a part of a Western tradition that perceived itself as being something other than despotic or tyrannical, and yet it's absolutism. Okay, it's the theory coming out in guys like Hobbes' Leviathan, where the sovereign is everything. Okay, and eventually, what we're going to see happen out of things that go on in England and some of the challenges to absolutism is going to lead to a more democratic set of systems that are later going to be seen as the trend in the Western world. Okay, and then at the same time, while this is all going on, we are also dealing with on the frontiers of Europe, the Ottoman Empire, the Islamic world, okay, and while the Islamic world and the Christian world is demonizing each other on one hand, they're also doing a lot more business and influencing each other more than either side probably want to admit, especially as time goes on. And so that's kind of where we're at. And then what we're going to be now shifting into is the scientific revolution, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. I'm going to give you a nice documentary on it, and we're going to just kind of cover. I'm going to end it there. But real quick to go back to, for England and the influence on the United States. The one thing that I'm always going to emphasize when I get the opportunity is that the United States of America, though an experiment, a kind of revolutionary reform of European ideas, we are an extension as members of the United States a part of that European legacy, and we come out of specifically the British context. And sometimes I think after the revolution and the war for independence, we've kind of almost liked to downplay that influence and that legacy that we have. But you just can't. We can celebrate our uniqueness, but we also are coming out of it. All the flaws and all the beauty. But we are coming out of this European context. So I'm going to end this there, and then I'll post the other two lectures for finishing up this section of the chapter 16.